Hello and welcome to Craft and Create. Today's craft is going to be canvas embroidery. My name is Kelsey Hughes and I work at the South Bowie branch, and I'm excited to show you this craft today. So this is what your final product will look like. And these are the materials you're going to need. You'll need construction paper, paint, any kind of paint, watercolor, oil, acrylic, paint brushes, string, sewing materials. The string should be an embroidery string, and you'll also need sewing needles, a marker, and a canvas. So first thing we're going to do is put some paint get some paint out. I ended up using oil paint, but you can use any type of paint, like I said. So I chose two colors. You could also do a monochromatic look, and you're just going to make a simple kind of block print background. If you want to do one color, you could kind of create a diagonal line across the middle of the canvas and break it up that way. You could do two corners, which is what I'm doing. You could do something more abstract. You're just going to create kind of a simple background that your embroidery can go on top of that won't be too distracting with the embroidery on top of it, but might add some extra visual fun to it. So you can see here I chose oil paints, and it provided some difficulty for me, so it's a little bit frustrating to watch, but I was trying really hard to get the most out of the paint and also to create a straight line. It's really hard to do that freehand, so you can be as perfectionist with this as you want. I ended up freehanding it at first, and then you'll see in a bit I actually decided to go with a straight edge instead. But so I've already made kind of the outline of my first corner, and now I'm doing the second corner. I'm speeding this up because it took me a long time to get the paint out, and it definitely won't take you this long when you're doing it. So again, just trying to make that straight line. I decided to go with the green and blue, so I thought those would look nice together. Just trying to do that straight line and making it worse as I go. All right, so now I'm going to fill in the block that I made. And then I realized that I actually would like more of my canvas to be painted. So I ended up drawing my line a little further down. And you can see again, the straight line was eluding me. Oil paints are a really difficult medium to work with. I think in retrospect, I would probably not recommend using those. Acrylics would be a lot easier. Acrylics would probably be the best. Okay, I'm filling in that green corner, and then I decided, like I said, to use a straight edge. So I'm just lining up a piece of construction paper and painting over it to create that straight line. All right, and that worked much better for me, and then I could just kind of go back and fill in the gaps. Got more paint there. Continue painting. And now I'm going to go back and fill in the bottom, the blue. Now that I have my straight edge trick, I can fill it in a little bit and then use that to kind of tidy it up. Okay, so now I finished painting. The next step is going to be to create my stencil for my embroidery. So I got a fresh piece of construction paper. Open that up. It doesn't matter what color because ultimately you're not going to see this stencil. It's just a template for you to follow while you're sewing. And I wanted to make a flower. You can make any simple line design. I would advise that whatever design you choose, all the lines connect, because the more separate lines you create, as you'll kind of see as I start to work on this, the more work it is to connect those in the back end when you're sewing. It's not impossible, and it definitely worked out okay for me, but the more connections you have, the easier it is, and the more simple it is to do your project. And you definitely want something that is a very line-based drawing, because that will come through the best in your sewing. So I decided to create kind of a branch of leaves, and I'm really just kind of freehanding it and eyeballing it. If I didn't like it, I might have started over. You can see each one I just start with a stem, and then I kind of create a funky shape, trying to make all the leaves look a little bit different from the other as they go down, maybe getting a little bigger as I go down. Maybe some clusters. You can see here I'm making some leaf clusters instead of straight big leaves. So you can be as creative with this as you want, based on what kind of visual art you'd like to have in your project. Just adding some finishing touches. Okay, and now that my template is complete, I can remove it from the construction paper pad and set that aside. And now I'm going to get my canvas that I painted and have allowed the paint to dry. And what I'm going to do now is line up my template the way I want it on the art. And you can see, I realized when I put my flower on, at first it was kind of hanging out right in that white gap on my painting, and I wanted it to overlap a little more with the color blocked corners. And now I'm taking a safety pin. If you have a needle, like a thick needle, you could use that instead. I didn't have any thicker needle, so I used a safety pin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to poke holes along the template. So everywhere that I drew a black line, aligned with my marker, I'm going to poke small holes. You want to try to make them as evenly spaced as possible. I made each one maybe not too far apart. I really made them pretty close together and tried to make them even. And I'm just working my way, making holes all the way to cover all the drawn pieces of the template that I created. And you really want to hold your template in place, because if it moves even slightly, then it's going to be really hard for you on the when you start sewing to figure out what to follow. So you really want to make sure that your template doesn't move. You might even want to tape it down to your canvas. You can definitely do that. I'm just going in there on the detail work. just finishing up the bottom leaves there. Almost done. Poking my holes. Okay, and once I've finished poking the holes, I'm going to remove my template once I'm sure that I've covered the whole surface. And you can see that you can very clearly see the spots where I poke the holes, and that's going to be our roadmap for where we want to sew. And it's okay that it's not perfect. You can fix some of those things as you're sewing. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to tie a knot at the end of my string, and I've already threaded my needle. I just used a standard needle. If you have one that has a bigger eye for you to put the thread through, that would really help. I didn't, and it just took a little bit longer to get it threaded, but it was still okay. And I made a really big knot because I know that the canvas is kind of porous, so I wanted to make sure that it wouldn't get pulled through. So I made my knot, I have my needle threaded, and now what I want to do is I want to flip my canvas over to the back and find a starting point that I think is going to make the most sense. I'm usually at the beginning, or the bottom or the top, or the beginning or end is going to make the most sense, and I want to poke my needle through the hole in the back. This way the knot that I just made is hidden and my thread is attached to my project, but unless you're looking at the back of the art, you can't see it. So I'm pulling the string through. Now I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to find the next hole that's next to where I just sewed. So the next closest hole is going to be right there. I'm going to put it through, and I found it easiest, even though it's a little annoying, to just flip the canvas back and forth as I did this. If you're an expert sewer, sometimes folks are able to kind of do multiple stitches really quickly, but I found for this, because it was so thick and kind of bulky, it was easier to just flip back and forth each time. So you kind of get in a rhythm as you go. So I've just made another stitch. Looking for the next hole there. I'm going to poke it through. You're starting to see the rhythm of it here. It's pretty straightforward. Now, one thing I did do as I was sewing is occasionally I would notice that the holes are a little further apart than the other ones. There might be two holes that were kind of further apart than my standard that I had set. So what's nice about this is you're still able to kind of create your own additional holes if you need to as you go. So there definitely were a couple times where I wanted the stitching to be more even, and so I just kind of moved where I thought the hole should go. And as long as you're setting it up in such a way that the string, the stitch that you create is going to cover the old hole if you're not going to use it, it won't be noticeable that you made a mistake. And in fact, there's a couple spots where I did this and you can see the old hole, but it's only if you're looking at it really close up. From far away, you can't tell. So definitely mistakes happen, and they're okay, and the work will still look nice at the end. I'm just going to keep on going with sewing. This is really the last major piece of the project here. It's just sewing those stitches. One thing to note, I didn't make my string super long when I threaded the needle. If you wanted to, you could definitely do that, so you don't have to stop and tie off and rethread a new piece of string. I just found that you can see here I'm making a new hole, by the way, because I found that the gap was too big. I just find that sometimes when you're sewing, if your string that you're working with is too big, it can be really cumbersome and really painful for your arm to kind of stretch it out far enough to be able to get the string all the way through. So I find it's easier to just have to rethread the needle a couple extra times. And one other thing you can see here is that my paper actually did move a little bit, it looks like, when I was poking the holes for the template, because the stem of one leaf is a little bit kind of overlapping with the stem of the whole branch. And so I noticed that while I was sewing, and that was an easy enough fix to just pretend that leaf didn't have a very long stem and not use the other side of it. So that was an easy enough fix. And you can see me getting ready to do that here and just skip over those 3 holes that I needed to. Alright, so I'm getting ready to make the turn into my first leaf. One thing I wanted to show you, I kind of jumped forward a little bit here, but this is me finishing up that first leaf. I did some behind the scenes work here to go all the way around the leaf. But this is me finishing up that leaf. And one thing I wanted to show you is how to end a stitch when you run out of thread, or if you need to kind of change direction to go to the next piece of the project. So I'm just finishing up the kind of stem of the leaf here, or the vein of the leaf. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew under the last stitch that I created on the back. And I'm going to pull, be careful, don't poke yourself, pull the needle out the other side. I had to kind of like brush it forward to get it through. The string is thicker, so it's a little more difficult to work with. And then you'll see that made a tiny loop, and I want to put my needle through that loop, and I've made a knot. And just for safety, I do that one more time. So now I put my needle through the new loop that I've just created, pull it through, and then I put my needle through that loop that was created. And so by doing that, you're essentially making a knot with your sewing. If you're not careful, like I just was not in that demonstration, the knot will be a little bit far away from the art. If you go slow and kind of gently guide the knot, you can make it really close and lined up with the art, so it's just a little neater. But either way, you can't really tell from the front side, and you'll have neatly wrapped up your art. And so you'll just want to keep going with that. Just keep sewing. Eventually, you'll get the whole thing done. If you still have more string but you reach an end point, what you can do also is just sew so that it's in the back, and then kind of just jump your needle to the next spot you need to restart. And so on the back end, you'll notice that there is a little bit of messiness where you're kind of jumping from spot to spot, but on the front end, you won't see any of that. And so you can see that pictured here. But yeah, then once you complete your whole project, you're going to tie off, and then this is what the finished item will look like. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining me today. For more crafting ideas and resources, please check our website at www.pgcmls.info. While there, click on the Online Library and then Online Resources buttons. And on that page, if you scroll down to the letter C, you'll see our resource Creative Bug. Creative Bug is an amazing tool that allows you to take free classes taught by experts on a wide variety of craft topics and different types of skills. You can see here there are some more embroidery classes if you're interested in that. There's also painting, bookmaking, crocheting, sewing, and lots more available to you, all with your library card. Please also stay tuned for more Craft and Create programs for adults. We have a lot coming up over the next year. And again, thank you so much for joining me, and have a wonderful rest of your day.